Today I'm trying something that I've never done before, and I'm pretty scared to do it. So this is my Fender Marauder, and if you've seen my channel before, then you might know that it's my favorite guitar. It's got the best neck that I've ever played, I love the Jazzmaster pickup, and I just really like the whole design and vibe of it. But it's got some problems. The pickup selector keeps cutting out. The nut slots have worn down, so I get fret buzz no matter how much I adjust it. And the triple bucker, while a cool idea and probably the defining feature of the Marauder, doesn't sound that good to me. So today, I'm going to fix all of that. Now, while I'm comfortable with setting up a guitar, and I've done some very basic resoldering and things like replacing the pick guard, I've never actually replaced any electronics on a guitar before, and I've certainly never tried replacing a nut, which is a fairly involved process, especially for this one because it's actually lacquered into the neck. It forms part of the finish. So my biggest fear is that I could mess this up somehow and ruin my favorite guitar, which is why I've needed some help and advice on how to get started with all of this. And luckily, I knew just who to ask.
Hey everyone, Nisebelle here.
If you've not seen Nisebelle's channel yet, you have to check it out. I only found her channel earlier this year, but it's quickly become one of my favorites. There's a ton of knowledge about mods, repairs, and really cool guitar tech projects. And importantly, it's really fun and inspirational to watch. And it's one of the reasons that I feel a bit more confident in trying this work myself. So I reached out to Nisebelle and asked for any advice that she could give. And she very kindly set aside some time for us to talk through how to approach this work. And in the spirit of her channel, a good beginner mod that I could add at the same time.
I think that replacing the pickguard like you did is actually a really fantastic place to start for beginner mods, because not only is it just kind of a reversible aesthetic change that you can do, but it gets you to learn the placement of all of your components. After that, I honestly think the easiest mod to do, and this is less of a mod and more of repair work, but is replacing your input jack or your output jack, because that has the least amount of contact points compared to something like a pot. I always think that's a great place to start, you know, swapping out whatever you have in there for a like a Switchcraft one, like something that's just gonna last you for a much longer time. But anything past that, I think that it's a really good idea to sort of ask, what are you trying to fix on this guitar?
One thing that really, I think, bothers me about this guitar is like one of the reasons that people like it so much is that triple bucker. So one thing that I'd like to do at some point is replace the pickup.
I did have a question, because you're replacing the switch. Do you use every position?
No, I either use the neck by itself or the humbucker, like just the two by itself. I won't use anything in between it.
That could be something to think about when you're looking at replacing the switch, is like, if I'm gonna replace this whole switch anyway, do I need all 5 options? Because sometimes they can kind of get in the way. And also what you're kind of missing from that is you don't have the option to have the humbucker and the bridge itself, or in the neck itself, in a combo, kind of like a Telly or a Les Paul or something like that.
So talking it through with Nisebelle was really, really useful, and she had some great ideas that I just wouldn't have thought of. So I sat down and I planned what I needed for this project. So top of the list is a really sturdy and reliable nut. So I've gone for this Graphtec Tusk nut because I've heard really good things about them, and I've actually wanted to try one for quite a while. And this XL model is self-lubricating, which means that the strings should move really smoothly over it, which is better for my tuning stability. I also figured it made sense to replace the output jack, like Nisebelle said, because the pickup switch is already gone, so the output jack could be next. So I picked up this Pure Tone multi-contact output jack that has 2 contact points for both the live and the ground signal, which in theory should make it even more reliable. And for the pickup switch, I really liked Nisebelle's idea of replacing the existing 5-position switch with a 3-way switch, so I've picked one of those up. And what that'll do is it'll give me the Jazzmaster neck and the humbucker part of the triple bucker, which are the only 2 settings that I use at the moment, but it'll also let me blend the 2, which I've never actually heard before. It's a fairly small mod, but it's a solid first step into fine-tuning this guitar for me, and it potentially saves me from buying a new bridge pickup. So I've got all the parts, now it's time to get started. So I'm starting with the nut first because I want to use the old strings as a makeshift clamp to hold the new nut in place while the glue dries. So I'm going to go nut, and then output jack, and then pickup switch. So I loosened the old strings and moved them out of the way, which was really easy with these vintage style tuners, and I put down some low tap masking tape to protect the wood either side of the nut. So you can actually see on the nut there where it's discoloured, because that's where I've put graphite or just pencil lead into those nut slots to keep it lubricated over the years. But with this one, this new nut, I shouldn't have to do that because, as I said, it's self-lubricating. So that's something I won't have to do anymore. I grabbed my craft knife and began scoring the sides of the nut to loosen it up, making sure to remove the lacquer on the edges as well, but more on that in a second. Then I gave it a couple of firm taps with a screwdriver to loosen it and gently lift it out, which didn't work. I figured it was glued in pretty well, so I got my soldering iron and a damp cloth and ran it against the edge to soften the glue, and it finally came out. But there was a problem. So we have had a little bit of a casualty. You can kind of see there, that little corner bit just at the end has come away. And that's because the lacquer wasn't scored off enough that side. So when I've knocked the nut, it's just taken that bit with it. So I've popped on some wood glue and I'm holding it in place with some elastic bands, and that should be good as new in the morning. It won't affect the overall playability anyway. I could leave it off, but it's just a little cosmetic thing. And yeah, as I said, hopefully should look fine in the morning. So here it is now, the next day, and it actually looks pretty good considering that whole section was missing yesterday. So the glue's set and it's a properly solid joint that's not going to cause any problems. And I've gone over it with some super glue as well, and then sanded it back with a really fine grit of sandpaper to give it the kind of lacquered look. So this whole section is smooth, even though you can see where there's been a crack. It's smooth to the touch. And it's behind the nut anyway, so it's not going to bother my playing. But yeah, it actually looks pretty good. And maybe it adds a little bit of character as well. So I got to installing the new nut, and you can see where the soldering irons melted it a little bit. It also had a flat base, whereas the Graphtec nut is curved, but it has that little nub on the bottom that makes it fit into a flat nut slot, which is really handy. It also comes a little bit larger, which is normal, so I sanded it down using some 240 grit sandpaper, removing a little bit of material at a time, and also trying not to sand my fingers. I did that a couple of times until I got a nice tight fit, but it was raised very slightly on the low E side because of some extra material in the nut slot. So I got to removing that, again doing a very little bit at a time and checking it constantly until it was level. So the nut's in there and it fits right, there's no gaps, there's no movement. It's a snug fit but not too tight, which is good. I'm not gluing it down yet though, because the old strings that I had on were a gauge 9, and I'm going to be using these gauge 11 strings, so I don't want to take the measurements on a 9 and then sand it down and then find that it's too low for the 11s, because then I'll have fret buzz and then I'll be in the exact same position when I started, which is the reason that I'm replacing that nut. So I'm going to get started with the electronics, and I'll set up the nut and glue it in last. I set up my soldering station and removed my pick guard so I could access the pickup switch. I trimmed off the wires to remove the switch, which felt a little bit scary, and then planned how to connect everything to the new switch. For this build, I used a standard tele wiring diagram to connect everything together in a humbucker bridge single coil neck setup. I used a tele wiring diagram because it's the only guitar that I could think of that has the blade style 3-position switch. But I needed to figure out how to isolate the humbucker part of the triple bucker and prepare the new 3-way switch with a bridging wire. I figured the top rail of the triple bucker, which is just a single coil pickup, used these brown and blue wires, so I'd just keep the blue grounded and not attach the live wire to anything. These bottom 4 wires would then be the humbucker, with the red being the live wire and the green the ground. I then prepped the new pickup switch by tinning the lugs. I used this braided wire for bridging and trimmed a couple of pieces to size, connected them, and checked that everything worked. Then I connected the output wire, the neck pickup, and my bridge, which looking at it now is a little bit iffy. Then I connected all my grounds together. After some very rigorous testing and troubleshooting, it looked like everything was working. Then I got to installing the output jack, and I agree with Nisebelle, this is a great place to start if you're a beginner. It was super easy and a really welcome break after dealing with all the other stuff. I cut off the old wires, stripped the ends to expose some new wire, and then soldered them into place. I checked all the wiring again and then started reassembling everything. Finally, I installed my new strings, gave it a quick setup, and was ready to try out my new and improved guitar. I'm so happy with how this project's turned out. Not only have I learned a lot, but it also feels like I have a brand new guitar. The new nut is amazing. I no longer have fret buzz on my open strings, which is great, and I can get a nice low action again, so it feels amazing to play. I've also not glued it in yet, because I've really put the guitar through its paces and it's holding its tuning and intonation, so I'm just going to leave it as is for the time being. The output jack is great as well because it really holds onto my guitar cable, so I'm not going to accidentally pull anything out while I'm playing. But more importantly, the double contact points for the ground and live signal really make it feel like it's going to last a long time. And the gauge 11 strings provide plenty of punch and power. But for me, the big standout is this three-way switch and the middle position. I love how the Jazzmaster neck sounds with the humbucker, and it's definitely a sound that I was missing from this guitar. I also like that I've just got the three options now because I can find a use for each of them and it really feels like I'm using the guitar to its full potential. Now, am I done working on this guitar? No. The bridge needs replacing because a long time ago I snapped a whammy bar in there and I just want to do something a little bit more fun with it. I also want to get a proper perloid pickguard on here because this is just a flat picture. And I also want to try out a new humbucker in the bridge position, something that has a bit more power and a bit more character behind it. And I have got my eye on a couple. But these things can wait for another time, because right now, I just want to enjoy having my favourite guitar working properly again. I really want to thank Nisebelle again for helping me out with this, for her time, her advice, and her great ideas that have completely refreshed this guitar for me and made it feel even better than before. Make sure to check out her channel, which I've linked in the description below. I promise you'll enjoy it. As for me, thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.